I think at the bigger level, the thing to certainly that's been clear on my end in working through much of this is that these dynamics of spiraling wealth inequality, the increasing power of just a select number of men. These things don't last. These things can't last. There's always some kind of blowback. There's always some kind of pendulum swinging the other way. If they're lucky, it will be via the kinds of reforms that we just mentioned a moment ago, right? The kind of corporate financing reforms, the kind of wealth inequality reforms. If they're unlucky, it will be something significantly worse for them. And again, whether it's a figure like a new Teddy Roosevelt coming in to usher in these kinds of reforms, that's one possibility. I mean, another possibility is a French Revolution.
Before we get started on today's show, please hit like and subscribe. So, Casey, you just published The United States of Oligarchy. It's a new book about how America's wealthiest are allying with dictators, they're weakening the U.S., and they're destroying democracy. But you are also, you've been an author before this. You're an investigative journalist. You've reported on transnational corruption, illicit finance, money laundering, foreign lobbying, and you've been officially sanctioned by the Russian government. I really appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Afeef. Yeah, I was sanctioned by the Russian government the day after the previous book came out.
Yeah, what were your other books?
The first one was called American Kleptocracy, which came out in 2021, and that looked at how the U.S. has become the center of international money laundering around the world. And the second book was called Foreign Agents, which looked at the rise of the foreign lobbying industry in the United States. So now a multi-billion-dollar industry of Americans acting as mouthpieces for some of the worst governments out there. So, yeah, and now the new one is about the rise of an American oligarchy. I promise the conversation today will not be as dreary and depressing as some of those topics.
I mean, you come for the most powerful among us. Are you ever afraid of what they're thinking about you, like what they're plotting against you?
No, I'm frankly not. And I I used to say this with a little bit more enthusiasm. Of course, I'm very fortunate to be an American citizen with all the protections that come with that. But yeah, now it's let's say the last year and a half, things have shifted a little bit, and those protections are maybe not what they once were. But no, I am I'm not scared of any of them. I'm only scared of my beautiful wife and making sure not to cross her.
Period. As you should be.
Yes.
You start the book with a lot of really important facts and figures that I thought were super clear about the problem in the modern context. One of them was that from 1946 to 2005, 90% of America owned more than the top 1%. Are there any figures that stick with you that kind of illustrate the problem in the modern context?
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of figures you can choose. And again, what we're talking about is the general collapse, disintegration of an American middle class, especially compared to the growth of an American ultra wealthy or oligarchic class over the last half century or so, really accelerating over the last 15, 20 years. I mean, the things that stick out to me are not just, and look, the book has plenty more on this, not just that kind of intersection of when the great bulk of Americans no longer had as much wealth as the wealthiest 1% or even the wealthiest 0.1%, because that's an even more accelerated story right there. That's certainly a reality. But I think maybe even an easier thing to wrap my mind around is just looking at the taxation rates against the wealthiest Americans. It's not, you talk about trillions of dollars in wealth. It's kind of a hard thing to really grasp. Like, what does $1 trillion even look like? But if you're talking about how in the 1940s you had inheritance tax rates and income tax rates for the wealthiest Americans at 85, 90%, I think people can kind of generally understand what that means. Fast forward 75, 80 years, and now that has effectively collapsed across the board, not only in terms of the taxation rates, but also just what they're actually paying in taxes, what's called the effective taxation rates, because of things like anonymous shell companies, how they're hiding their money, and the collapse of the ability to investigate any of this. Right? It's just really, really nosedived. I mean, that's really been the thing that has stuck out to me in putting this book together.
Yeah, I kind of want to get into that. Like what you mentioned is that income tax policies loosened in the 60s. Can you kind of like unfold that for me, like where we were and why we're here now?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was having this conversation with someone earlier today where you have these, a lot of MAGA folks who have this idea that if we just go back to the 1950s of, you know, mom and dad, two kids and a white picket fence, everything will be just fine. Why can't we have that? And the thing that they don't talk about is that at the time, in those 1950s, you had sky high taxation against the wealthiest individuals in the United States, with much of that money going toward the kind of governmental services that those white families at the time in the United States were able to benefit from. I mean, look, this decline, this descent of the United States into the kind of oligarchy we have now, this didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen in a kind of a steady motion. It wasn't, 1 year progressively worse, progressively worse, progressively worse. You have a couple kind of watersheds. One was in the 1960s, where you had not a general decline itself, but kind of the principle that, if we lower taxation for the wealthiest, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world.
Like the trickle down economics idea?
Yes, this is when,
okay.
In the 1980s, when we have things like trickle-down economics, neoliberalism, which I'm sure you and plenty of listeners have heard of and can kind of understand. Right, it's just general deregulation and the loosening of capital for private use rather than public use, rather than for what the government might be able to do with it. And this was the 1980s, right? This is Ronald Reagan. This is him taking an absolute hammer to all of these tax rates, to say nothing of how he gutted governmental services kind of across the board. That was really when things fell off a cliff and just kind of continued falling from there, even under the second George W. Bush administration. And then, of course, accelerating even further under the Trump administration. So, yeah, it's kind of these steady drop-offs, a series of cliffs rather than one steady decline that we're talking about over the course of 75, 80 years leading to where we are now.
Yeah, so it's like on the one hand, the rich are getting less taxed. And then on the other hand, governmental services for like everyone else that's not extremely rich is getting less robust. It's just becoming more and more gutted. And then you have this industry that you kind of write about, which I just think is just conversationally interesting. Like there is the wealth defense industry, which I immediately understood what that was. It was like just very immediate, like, oh yeah, like there's all of these lawyers and tax people and all these people that have jobs protecting wealth for the richest people. Did that also grow at the same time? Can you kind of tell us a bit about that for people who are listening?
Yeah, look, I mean, these things are all working in tandem with one another. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. I think the thing to pull back and remember is there have always existed ultra wealthy individuals in the United States of America. They have always sought out ways to protect that wealth, both for themselves, but maybe especially for their children and grandchildren. And for years in the mid 20th century, the federal government was able to keep those figures in check and those families in check and be able to redistribute some of that wealth. There were still wealthy individuals, but the level of wealth inequality was nowhere near what we saw, in the Gilded Age in the 1890s, 1900s, and certainly nowhere where we are now. But these pressures built up by the 1970s and the 1980s. We just talked about the tax rates, but you also see the emergence of this kind of secondary class of professionals, white collar professionals. A lot of lawyers, a lot of accountants, a lot of tax professionals, and others that are now running things like family offices and other investment portfolios that allow those wealthy individuals to take advantage of all of the loopholes and all of the policies to protect that wealth for themselves. And again, for their family members, for their children, because again, what we're talking about at the end of the day is not just the levels of wealth inequality that lead to something like oligarchy, but the kind of strengthening, the kind of entrenchment of this almost aristocratic class of Americans that are able to propagate all of that wealth for generations to come. There's this thing out in, it started in South Dakota. It's spread elsewhere now. It's called a dynasty trust, which it's one of these terms that I absolutely love because it really, they're not being coy about what they're trying to do with this thing, to create this anonymous financial secrecy vehicle that'll protect all of your wealth from any kind of tax authority or journalist, whoever it is, for the creation of a dynasty right here in the United States of America. Yeah, it's why bother pulling yourself up by your bootstraps when your parents can do it for you?
Absolutely. And why even believe that that's possible anymore? Because there's just truly no way forward unless you have access. And I kind of want to talk about our local oligarchs for a second, because you kind of drag the greatest tech oligarchs there are. I would like to go into a little bit about Peter Thiel. People probably know who he is. I think a lot of listeners probably know his name. They probably understand that he's a very scary figure, but who is he now and what is he doing?
Peter Thiel is a billionaire out of Silicon Valley. He's most closely associated with that. He initially made his wealth via PayPal. Grew close to figures like Elon Musk. This was now 20, 25, 30 years ago. And was also one of the early investors in Facebook, and so grew close to figures like Mark Zuckerberg as well. He is maybe the most notorious face of this idea, not only of a tech oligarchy in America, but the idea that these figures are opponents of democracy and actually want to supplant American democracy with something different, some kind of autocracy, maybe even a monarchy. The book and plenty of others go into detail about these kind of dreams they have of a king CEO type figure to be able to take decisive action without the kind of concerns about, again, democratic oversight or transparency. Thiel wrote this infamous essay back in 2009 where he talked about how capitalism and freedom are not compatible with one another. And that's basically a direct quote. And his idea, any threats of a democratic country imposing, again, things like increased taxation, increased transparency, increased enforcement, those are anathema. Those are opposed to what he wants.
I think one of the most interesting examples you used was Peter Thiel's use of Roth IRAs as a good example of tax minimization is almost just the same as like tax evasion nowadays. And I just was really taken aback at how greedy this all is, really, like how the greed in it all. Can you kind of explain what he did and what you know about that?
Look, there's one of the chapter titles is "How Greedy Can You Get?" which, again, of course, I thought was a great quote. So I put that as the chapter title. To get really nerdy for a second.
Yes, please.
Everyone should be saving for their retirement. I wish I'd been doing that years and years earlier. But one of the things that folks in Congress did a couple decades ago is they created this thing called a Roth IRA, or Roth Individual Retirement Account, which is named after a senator who proposed it, Senator Roth. And it was, again, it's relatively simple. It was supposed to be for middle-class Americans, working-class Americans, to be able to save more for their future selves. So instead, you're putting money away for your retirement. Generally, before that money would be taxed when you pulled it out. So when you're 65 or 70 or whatever, that money had been growing and growing. But then when you pull it out, you have to pay, 15 or 20 or 30% tax on it. What they did was kind of flip that so that you are now paying taxes when you put it in. It's a smaller amount when you put it in. It hasn't grown yet. So theoretically, you're actually paying less in taxes. You're paying taxes now, but it's a smaller amount than you'd be paying eventually. And again, I have a Roth IRA. A lot of my friends have Roth IRAs. A lot of people I know do, because it is a great tool for making sure that you're getting more money in your golden years. The problem is what a number of now extremely wealthy Americans realized is you don't have to be just a middle-class American. There was a cap. I don't remember the specific number, but if you make more than, $100,000 a year or $150,000, you're not supposed to be able to have something like this. But what these individuals, Peter Thiel, Warren Buffett also did something similar to this, realized is you can, on paper, have extremely low income, but still have all of these investments that mean you're extraordinarily wealthy. So you can still qualify for this Roth IRA. And then beyond that, you can put stocks in there. It's not just money you put in. You can put stocks in there. And if those stocks are worth pennies on the dollar, but because those stocks or that investment is going to be going public soon, are going to be worth magnitudes more, millions, maybe even billions more, then you can put that in. You're still below the threshold. And oh my God, when your company goes public and that's now worth billions, guess what? That's not going to be taxed because it's in this Roth IRA. And you can pull it out perfectly freely, perfectly legally without having to pay any taxes on it whatsoever. Look, this isn't illegal, right? These aren't committing any crimes. It's certainly, murdering the spirit of the law, what it was supposed to be. But yeah, that's what this Roth IRA scandal with figures like Peter Thiel was all about. And again, we can talk about Thiel's anti-democratic attitudes for as much as you want, Afeef. But yeah, that's how one of the many tools that he used to get extraordinarily wealthy using these loopholes that are available.
Listen, as a regular person, to have my taxes that I'm paying, whatever, like every time you're delayed with turning in your taxes. You're like paying them off for so long. I mean, not to even mention like groceries and rent and all of this stuff. You just get so pissed off realizing that the rich among us have access to the best sort of class of people capable of allowing them to like dodge and scam and get their money. And then they're the type of person who scams that hard. And then they're also the type of person, and again, I'm speaking very generally and being very unjournalistic, but it's like they are also the type of person like Thiel who has all of these fantasies of like autocrats that are noble and like efficiency that's like really inhumanitarian. And so you have all of these very rich people who've done a very good job of scamming who are now at the very top of society, dictating the way society is working. So what do you think people like Thiel want? Like, what do they want to happen?
Well, ultimately, and without trying to spend too much time in his mind, it's clear that they want to be able to protect their capital, regardless of what that means for the rest of us, regardless, frankly, for what that means for the United States of America. I don't think it's any surprise that Thiel's kind of in-house philosopher is a guy named Curtis Yarvin, who is, on the one hand, a completely ignorant fraud who does not understand the basics of geopolitical history or of regional realities, whether in Russia and the post-Soviet space or in China or East Asia. I'm assuming around the world as well. This is a guy who not long ago claimed that there was no European genocide until the Holocaust, which of course completely ignores, I don't know, any kind of history of North America or the African continent, or the list goes on and on. But leaving that to the side, this is also a guy who is a self-proclaimed monarchist, who again believes that the United States of America does not need a democracy, does not need any kind of democratic buy-in, but needs a figure, it goes without saying, like Thiel, to lead this nation into a new anti-democratic future, and of course to be able to protect all of his and his related oligarchs' wealth along the way. This is, by all appearances, what a figure like Thiel and some of the others in his orbit want and are working to achieve.
And it feels like, from his perspective, it's like efficiency. It's like, freedom of being. It's like the capacity to create and design anything. I mean, because when I think of people like Thiel, and then you've also mentioned in your book Elon Musk, there's a lot of things that he has done, right? Whether it's Neuralink or whether it's in Ukraine, like people being able to access the internet during wartime. But one thing that I thought was so interesting, it almost feels like amoral tech people that he just started changing his entire political philosophy around Ukraine, even around China. And I think that really revealed to me that, they're more interested in their business interests and their business access and their access into countries than they are actually all of this free speech and stuff that they've grown famous for in many ways.
Well, look, the principle for all of these figures that I write about in the book is prioritizing the security of their wealth at all costs. And again, whether that's working within the kind of legal, political confines of the United States of America, or doing what they can to tear it down and even go out of their way and ally with American adversaries and other authoritarian movements around the world. That's the through line. That's the connective tissue. That's one thing that makes it different than what we saw even among those earlier American tycoons and oligarchs of the Gilded Age. Those guys were not allying with American adversaries back then. This is something new in American history that we have seen. I mean, look, Afeef, I watched all the same things that you did. I followed Elon Musk's, Twitter feed in real time, and to see all of these changes and shifts. And it's funny to think about, 10, 12, 15 years ago, so many of these guys were all these kind of, liberal darlings, these kind of, I don't know, they were meeting with Obama in the White House, and they were being treated like American entrepreneurs and signs of the success of American capitalism. And then, fast forward a couple of years, and all these guys are all lined up next to Donald Trump at his second inauguration, using millions, hundreds of millions of their own dollars to propel Trump back into the White House. And again, using that access, certainly in Elon Musk's case, to demolish all of these regulations on any of his businesses, right? We kind of look at all the, the racist apartheid era views that he has, and those are as heinous as anything. And we kind of leave the reality to the side that with Doge and with some of his other actions, one of the things that he was doing was just demolishing any kind of guardrails that would prevent, of course, his own commercial success, but also his own personal wealth from growing and growing. And that's what we've been dealing with for the last 18 months in the U.S.
And on top of all of this are people like Jared Kushner, who you mentioned like has failed his whole life, and then finds himself as a vector of foreign influence, like inside the Trump White House, whether he, is officially working, et cetera, et cetera. Dictators around the world, whether it's Netanyahu or MBS or MBZ or Putin, are affecting our politics because they have access into people who just want to get rich. So those people are saying, hey, I'm going to give you access to Trump. I'm going to give you access for money, basically, in one way or another, whether it's through a shell company, whether it's through, a lobbying pack, whatever, however way it kind of the sort of relationship unfolds. There's many ways. It feels like is that a new thing? Is that something we've been doing for a long time? There have been secret moles in the government, maybe, but it feels very new.
This is new. This is not something we saw during the Gilded Age. This is not something we've seen throughout American history. And it's, again, because of a couple dynamics. One, because American elections themselves are more open to more money than they've ever been in American history. A lot of that is the Citizens United decision, but there are other decisions and other realities that, again, opened up American elections no longer just to domestic money, domestic wealth, but now to foreign wealth as well. That's one element. The other element is the proliferation of things like shell companies that make it so easy to hide the tracks of where that money is coming from, where it's going, and what it's doing. And again, not just in the domestic context, but also in the foreign context. And again, also, for figures like Kushner, for figures like Musk, for figures like Thiel, they recognize that in order to implement the kind of policies that they want and protect the kind of wealth they have already made, they need to make sure that the correct politicians, whoever they may be, are in office where they need to be in the United States of America. And if it takes opening doors to foreign finance from Russia, from China, from Israel, from Saudi Arabia, the list goes on, then so be it. Because at the end of the day, Trump isn't going to prosecute any of them. His DOJ is not going to prosecute any of them. For the Netanyahus, for the Putins, for the MBSs, they realize, again, the door is wide open. Why wouldn't they be, barreling all of this money through into American politics? I mean, the case study that comes to mind, you remember Bob Menendez from the great state of New Jersey a couple years ago, who was secretly taking millions, if not tens of millions of dollars from the Egyptian military dictatorship, and ended up being prosecuted and is still now in jail. Which is just one case study of, I'm sure, dozens, hundreds more that we still don't know anything about. And I look forward to the day of these high-level investigations peeling back all of this information.
Yeah, do you think it's just wild greed? There was some thing in your book that I found really, really captivating, which was your time with the WCF in Moldova, the Christian fundamentalists. It really, listen, I've done a lot of embedding in the Middle East with extremely right-wing societies, and also with ISIS and Nusra, which became Syria's government, basically. Similar, but very different, obviously. Are these people just wildly greedy, or is there some coordinated ideological view of the world in the way it should be?
Well, as the phrase goes, why not both, right? If they're able to have their cake and eat them too. This is, yes, of course, there's all kinds of resonance with other hard right societies and communities, both contemporary and, of course, previous. And I'm thinking of, certainly some of the World War II era fascist regimes, but also the Cold War era far right authoritarian, the juntas and the other dictatorships in places like Latin America, Central America, and South America, right? There's plenty of overlap and plenty of resonance there. And yes, I think at the end of the day, if it takes toppling a democracy to protect that wealth, this is what these figures are willing to do. But one of the final chapters looks at the money, the deep pockets behind this push for Greenland annexation, regardless, of course, of what folks in Greenland or even in the United States want. But I was able to dive into and even talk to some of the figures that are helping finance this American imperialism in Greenland, and their vision not only of a place that is where all environmental or labor regulations are completely demolished and these wealthiest figures can extract as much natural wealth as they want, but even this kind of vision of a post-American future in which they can create this kind of new architecture of what a far-right anti-democratic regime in Greenland can look like, and how that can serve as a model both in the United States and even projecting into the future elsewhere, whether it's the moon, whether it's Mars. Again, this kind of intersection of sci-fi authoritarianism, the term that I learned recently is cosmism, so taking over the cosmos as this kind of anti-democratic playing thing. And again, you're literally getting into sci-fi territory here, but these are the kind of visions that some of these figures have, and as we have seen, they're willing to put their money on the table for it.
Going back to one of your first examples was Hawaii, and like just the colonialism, it feels very much like we need to keep expanding and getting as much resources to like sort of sustain our way of life, theirs as like the tech billionaires and what they believe is the right way to be. It is very interesting if you look at the history of Hawaii and exactly sort of how it unfolded and how it became a state, etc. You just realize like it's the same shit, different day, and it's like, but like different like circumstances, but the same shit, like the same energy is here, like.
Same shit, new oligarchs. I mean, look, you're exactly right. That's the reason that I included this whole story of the role of American oligarchs in the 1890s, toppling the Hawaiian government, instituting what they called the Republic of Hawaii, and then eventually leading to American annexation in 1898. That example versus where we are now, and even looking specifically at another island, in this case, Greenland, and the role of American oligarchs and what they want and what they envision their future as. Yeah, I mean, it's in many ways the same dynamics kind of repeating themselves. It's no surprise that the Hawaii example took place during the Gilded Age. It's no surprise the Greenland example is taking place now during this new second Gilded Age, which is of course even bigger and in many ways worse than the first one. Yeah, and it's trying to excavate parts of history to learn potential lessons for what it could actually mean. And again, in Hawaii's case, to lose that, it wasn't a democracy, it was a constitutional monarchy, moving in a more democratic direction. But to lose your nation, to lose that independence, to lose that sovereignty, which in Hawaii's case, right, has never been regained, is that something that we're potentially looking at, not just in Greenland, but even in the U.S. itself? I mean, I don't know, but I see trajectories that are emerging, and yeah, history can certainly rhyme.
Do you feel like this culture of oligarchism that feels like it's very much at the top is trickling down in any way? And I'm thinking of things like prediction markets and like media and like the ways in which our actual day-to-day lives are being, not just our finances and not just our politicians per se, but like actually the things we're taking in and the people we're becoming because of this culture. Is there a shift that you're noticing at all?
I mean, yeah, the short answer is yes. The model is that these wealthy figures are controlling more and more of the pot of American wealth. Of course, it also happens internationally, and making lives for those middle and working class Americans far more difficult, with far more avenues to effectively scam us out of whatever wealth remains for those individuals that are still in whatever remains of the American middle class. And again, it's things like the proliferation of crypto markets, especially prediction markets, the ability to not only monetize but bet on really any facet of American life, and that includes American policy right now. These are the kind of scraps that are left over for those individuals, again, outside of the oligarchic class, that don't see any other further way to find that kind of stable life, create a kind of stable home, right? We talked about the kind of 1950s vision of a nuclear family and a white picket fence. That vision seems like it's 1,000 years away, and the only thing remaining is trying to make that bet on whatever it might be to propel yourself forward. And what ends up happening is you end up in further debt because of it. It's no surprise that American debt continues to balloon, not only credit card debt, but other kinds of debts as well, that place you that much more at the mercy of the wealthy powers powers that be. And, at the end of the day, what does that lead to? It leads to a grievance. It leads to a kind of ethno-nationalism, and it leads to a kind of fury that propels not only the kind of anti-immigrant elements we have seen rise over the last 10 years, but even at the end of the day, the kind of anti-democratic animus that is needed for those powers that be that do want to topple American democracy. I mean, these are all parts of a piece, parts of a same dynamic that is, yes, to use the phrase, trickling down from American oligarchy. Again, I don't think it will last. I don't know what that breaking point looks like. But yes, it's not just that we can't fund healthcare or education opportunities or even basic infrastructure. It's also just the kind of the daily grind that we all go through. It gets worse and worse, more and more difficult because of this stretching of wealth inequality in this country that, yes, will reach a breaking point at some point.
What I think is fascinating about your book was the past and what we can kind of glean from the past as a way to learn what people are doing first and then learn how to like resist it. But one of the examples which I found fascinating, was that Watergate revealed, like even beyond Nixon's grab for power, it revealed this like extreme network of corporate executives hiding funds and bankrolling and bribing politicians and dictators around the world. Even back then, I think you have a figure of like 20% of Fortune 500 companies had been engaging in foreign corruption from, I'm just like reading my notes, from weapons manufacturers like Lockheed and Northrop Grumman to all sorts of companies basically creating shell companies to hide clandestine payments. Can you kind of break that open for us a little bit? Because as much as this is such a deep interest of mine, but it's always very hard to sort of cleanly explain what the hell was happening and how much worse has it gotten if it was already that bad then.
The things that I have written about in my entire career, they almost always center on corruption. What does corruption look like? What does it mean? How does it operate in the United States? And Watergate is remembered, correctly as this abuse of power, Nixon's power grab, trying to do whatever he could to remain as president. What's less remembered is that it was also a story about corruption and how Nixon and his allies were using the White House not only to enrich themselves, but also to help with Nixon's re-election chances in 1972, and using all of these different secret financial pathways hidden from public view from all of these American companies, American corporations. You just said it was something like 20% of American companies, right? These are the biggest American companies, weapons manufacturers, industrial manufacturers, oil and gas, the list goes on and on. Many of them secretly paying Richard Nixon in his re-election chances because they knew if he was back in the White House, he could push policies that benefited him. And it wasn't just in the U.S. they were doing this. They were doing this internationally as well. And I think what was striking to me, and yeah, you talked about, paying off all of the, these crooked officials in Saudi Arabia, military dictators in South Korea, even democratic allies in Italy and in the Netherlands, right? It wasn't just authoritarians they were paying off. They were paying anyone and everyone. By all appearances, it didn't look like they were committing any crimes. It wasn't illegal at the time to be paying bribes to foreign officials, kind of as weird as that sounds.
Yeah,
now.
right.
They realized after the fact, oh God, we actually have to make laws about this. We have to criminalize this.
Right.
So to your question, is it worse now? What is the big lesson of the Trump era? For me, at least, it's that laws at the end of the day are just words written on pieces of paper. And if no one is there to enforce them, then they don't actually matter at all. So the short answer is I don't know if it's worse now in terms of foreign bribery, right, because we just don't have that information. There haven't been the investigations. There haven't been the revelations. Hopefully we'll get that soon. But what we do know is that for as many legal reforms, as many new laws as there were criminalizing all of this, we have a president who's announced he's just not going to enforce it. He's not going to prosecute. He's not going to investigate. As long as you're staying in his good graces, you can bribe as many people, both in the United States and abroad, as you want. So I suspect it's worse than it's ever been. Again, because we have a president who has thrown the door open and said, be my guest. Send me as much of your money as you possibly can.
It almost feels like in this book, I really felt like everybody has a price. Like there's not really anyone who doesn't have a price. And a part of that is very disappointing, but it also feels potentially it's a problem that can be solved.
Yes.
Like it doesn't
Yes.
feel like it's a problem that is impossible to solve. And I think that what I really want to know is, what can we learn from history? Like when you think about all of the things you learned in the research of this book, the Tillman Act, there's so many policies that existed once. I think what people don't really realize is that like the Gilded Age happened. Then there was like a bunch of policies that really we can look to and say, hey, we need to bring those back, that got eroded over time. Like when you think about all of the things you've just learned and have been learning for probably a really long time, what is it that you think we need to really talk about and about bringing back?
Well, look, and Afeef, I'm very happy to nerd out about this. Some of this stuff, I wasn't expecting the Tillman Act to make an appearance, but look, oh my goodness, I appreciate you obviously reading the book and digging up some of the minutia that's in there, because yes, there are all these specific policies that have to be either reintroduced or implemented for the first time. So these are things like campaign finance reform. You have to end any kind of corporate financing of American elections. You have to implement brand new caps and limits on how much campaigns can accept in terms of donations and how much they can spend. And you have to have transparency for all of it. For wealth inequality, you have to have all of these new elements of taxation, right? Increased inheritance and estate taxes, increased income taxes, the introduction of a wealth tax for the wealthiest Americans. Those are things that have to happen. And then you have to eliminate things like anonymous shell companies and all these other, financial secrecy vehicles that the wealth defense industry that you mentioned earlier takes full advantage of. I mean, that's all stuff that you have to do, right? These are policy responses. I think at the bigger level, the thing to certainly that's been clear on my end in working through much of this is that, these dynamics of spiraling wealth inequality, the increasing power of just a select number of men. These things don't last. These things can't last. There's always some kind of blowback. There's always some kind of pendulum swinging the other way. If they're lucky, it will be via the kinds of reforms that we just mentioned a moment ago, right? The kind of corporate financing reforms, the kind of wealth inequality reforms. If they're unlucky, it will be something significantly worse for them. And again, whether it's a figure like a new Teddy Roosevelt coming in to usher in these kinds of reforms, that's one possibility. I mean, another possibility is a French Revolution style. Like these things emerge throughout history. I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to happen. This is necessarily what it's going to look like. I mean, I think it's worth flagging that one of the kind of underlying, reasons for the American Revolution 250 years ago, they talked about taxation without representation. Now, for the wealthiest figures, it's representation without taxation, which is not my line. Someone else came up with it, which is I love bringing that up. Right? These dynamics have emerged in American history. These dynamics certainly have emerged in global history at any point over the last 100, 150, 200 years. You can look at plenty of them to see just what that can mean for some of these wealthy figures when they let things get too far from this perception that they're not paying their fair share. At a certain point, that blowback happens, and it's just a matter of what they want that to actually look like.
Yeah. That's my last question is, what do you believe the breaking point looks like? Do you think it's like an incredibly large revolution? Do you think it's a tribunal? Do you think we need to get more educated about the past and actually like advocate for things? Like how the fuck do we resist?
A, more listeners to your podcast. That's a given. Yes. B, more readers of United States of Oligarchy. If we do those two, I mean, my God, we will be 90% of the way there. I mean, look, it's what I'm a nice, sunny, optimistic guy by nature, and hopefully that's coming through in the conversation today. I'll tell you what I would like to see. Right, one, it is the kind of broad-based reforms that we talked about earlier, both legislative and out of the executive branch. I mean, my God, if the opportunity is there for, in this case, any Democrat who wants to take it to place this kind of wealth inequality and corruption, this nexus is right there and available as a campaign plank and platform for not only 2026, but of course 2028, which is right around the corner. And yes, you have to have these kind of high-level hearings, especially out of Congress, to look at just how rotten this administration has become, just how corrupt this administration truly was. So of course we can have the kind of reforms necessary afterward. And if you could do both of those, the kind of legislative responses as well as these kind of high-level hearings, I think you can go a long way toward not of course, preventing any and all corruption, and not even tackling wealth inequality in and of itself, but going in significant ways to minimize many of the realities that we have seen develop over the last 15, 20, 30 years that have led to this kind of oligarchy to where we are now. This is a lesson from previous periods of American history. This is a lesson from places that we're seeing like Hungary right now, which is going through its own kind of democratic reforms, anti-corruption reforms, which of course have more lessons for Americans looking forward. I mean, that's what I hope we'll see. That's what I'll be working toward in the United States of America. There are other options that are available. I mean, as we were talking about, this country celebrating 250 years of revolution. And who's to say something like that won't happen again at some point? But I think there are other, maybe easier options on the table ahead of us as well.
From your lips to God's ears, inshallah, as we say in my culture.
We will see.
I really appreciate you so much for being on the show, and thank you for writing this, and I hope everybody goes out and buys this book, which is right here on my desk, and I'm almost done with it. So yeah, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Afeef. This is great.